Welcome back to the Grace Fellowship Podcast. Glad that you're joining us again for another week of chatter or conversation. Just to update you a little bit, church, on what has happened in the last week. This past Sunday, we had our Reformation Celebration and Show, and just want to give a huge shout out to all of our deacons who made that happen. Phenomenal job.
Great job.
This year was a lot of things different. But one of the main things different was that the staff people did not lead that charge. We gave that over to the deacons. They led that charge. They put everything together. They worked out all the details and plans. And, man, did they do a phenomenal job. We had a great day, even though it rained.
First time it's ever rained.
Man. First time it's ever rained.
On that day while we had the celebration, first time. So they handled it like champs.
I think it may have been like the second time rain has fallen from the sky in October.
It's very dry month.
And it only rained from 4:30 to 6:30.
That's exactly awesome. Right.
But yeah, had rained, still pulled it off in a fantastic manner. Had a great crowd for the show, for the reworked Reformation show where we had 5 guys dress up as reformers. David, you did a great job in narrating that.
Thanks.
Me and my family were at home watching that, and live stream was awesome to watch that.
Yeah.
And so if you missed that, you can go back on Facebook and check that out. It's just really neat the way that was put together and constructed from start to finish. And so deacons, just want to thank you.
And along with the deacons, those who did the trunk or treat stations.
Yes.
Even
fantastic.
with the curveball,
So
the
many
weather,
volunteers.
a lot of cool
We had a
setups.
camping scene. We had Candyland.
Hunting,
we had football, goalposts, people kicking through. It was fantastic.
Yeah,
The kids
watching
are
everybody
blast.
excited about their props, their setup, and then everybody. I went around and was judging all the booths, but my judging was depending on what kind of candy they had. So
Right.
if they had candy I liked, they won.
You're being swayed.
That's right.
That's good. That may fold into our conversation today. I'm just kidding. But really good stuff. Other announcements we've got, guys, going around.
November 6th, the ladies, that's this Sunday evening. They're having the Friendsgiving, which is a version of Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And so that's for our ladies ministry. I think it's been announced over and over again.
Yep.
But if you're watching this and hadn't heard about it, talk to Gail McClellan, Allison Ortiz, find out more details about that.
Yeah, and guys, make sure you kick your wives out of the house. Make them go to that. Watch the kids. Do whatever you got to do.
We're coming up on our pause for Romans. This week. We'll preach in Romans 7, 21 through 25. I'll be preaching. And then that'll pause Romans for the rest of this year, beginning of next year. Roll right into 2 sermons, standalone kind of sermons. I'll preach on the 13th, you on the 20th, dealing with the Lord's Supper and communion.
Yeah.
So we're super excited about helping everyone understand what do we really believe about communion. And I think it's so important. And then the Sunday after Thanksgiving begins Advent, which is an exciting time around here. Tons of stuff going on during the Christmas season. We know that, the holiday season. But I want to go ahead and give you the heads up. We'll be preaching the gospel according to Ruth, the book of Ruth. So Grace Fellowship, Mountain View, Anniston Bible Church, and Redeemer Church down in Oxford will all be preaching on the same Sundays from the same basic sermons, but in our own words. Obviously, we'll write our own sermons. We're going to have a smorgasbord of preachers during the month. We got Ryan Limbaugh leading it off on the 27th, and then I think I preach, and Jacob Pullen preaches after that, and then we roll over to Taylor Neese is preaching on the 18th, and then I'll finish up. And on the 25th, we realize that's Christmas morning. What better time to worship the Lord, than that on celebration of Him coming in human form for us.
Good.
And so that'll be a family Sunday. Everybody will be together, and we'll be very different. We're going to do a story time. Basically, I will be telling the story of Ruth, beginning to end in a redemptive historical fashion, leading us to Christ and the celebration of Christmas. We'll take the supper that day.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fantastic day on the 25th.
Yeah.
And then we'll be ready for the
next Sunday will be New Year's Day.
Yeah, New Year's Day, and that'll be the review of 2022. And so January will be a month full of different sermons, and then February we'll kick off Romans chapter 8.
Yeah.
I know we got a lot of people waiting on that one.
It is exciting. I had Christy Thacker tell me yesterday she's pretty upset that we just left everybody on a ledge because chapter 8's her favorite chapter, and so sorry, Christy. But it's great. I think we just saw yesterday that we only have 8 weeks left in this year. It's crazy how it seems like school starts and then all of a sudden the year's over.
Exactly.
So things do come flying at you, and we're excited about ending the year.
One other prep, just a reminder, we got a lot of new people now. December 23rd, we have traditionally called it the Christmas Eve service. We get together that evening. There'll be a lot of announcements about this. On December 23rd, we get together. Again, it's kid-friendly, but that service is 9 lessons in carols. So we're teaching 9 lessons from the Scripture by singing together. And so we read the Scripture and we sing a song, and we read the Scripture and we sing a song, and then we end with a couple of Christmas hymns with candlelight. And so it's a really beautiful service. It's one of the fan favorites. Kind of the people here at Grace Fellowship love that day. And so that's December the 23rd. We'll get more details about that, but I did want to mention that.
Yeah, thanks for that.
And one of the announcement type thing is Families Count comes to an end this Sunday. It's our last class of this, semester, and it's just been fantastic. Just more home groups jumping in and serving food, and the families just really feeling loved. We had a couple coming to church on Sunday mornings, and then most of them with their children stayed for the Reformation Celebration and hung out. And just one of the ladies commented the other day, like, I'm gonna miss this class. Like I've loved it here, and that's not just because of the class, but just really feeling the love from our body here. It's been really cool to watch. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and jump into the podcast.
Can I tell you a story before?
Please.
Before we do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I might disappear after telling this story because of who it's about, and this was not done in any way to get attention, but I get to see a lot of cool things back in the child care area, watching the way we do that with everybody rotating through and serving. Not everybody would sign up and say, yes, let me go serve in the children's area. And so because of the way we do that, people get put in some uncomfortable situations, something they wouldn't really do.
Sure.
And say, I do it every Sunday. And so Jim Jones, I want to talk about him for just a second. Jim Jones, if you don't know him, I encourage you just to get to know him. I know he's been a blessing to a lot of people, him and Ann. And this Sunday he was filling in because he missed when his home group served. And if you miss, then you're put on for family worship. You're asked to serve at that time. And so he, when he was asked, he was like, yep, I'll be there. Comes in, serves in the butterfly room, our 4 and 5-year-old room. And Mr. Jim always asks me, can I be with the oldest kids? And that usually is 4th, 5th, 6th graders. Right. Well, this Sunday we didn't have them back there. It was our 4 and 5-year-olds were the oldest. So he's in there with Dustin Mason. And I go in as children are showing up, just checking on them, make sure they're good, kind of walking through what they're going to be doing that day. And one of our 4-year-old girls is at the door with her mom and just crying. She's having a rough morning. She doesn't want to leave her mom. And a lot of times if I'm there, I'll just kind of help that. Like, hey, we're good, we got it. We'll let your mommy know if you need something. Just kind of walk through that. Well, I was talking to Dustin about something, showing him the TV, and looked over, and Mr. Jim, and if you know Mr. Jim, you know his background, and he has a military background. Just one of these men that you look at and you're like, that's a man right there.
Definitely.
That's a man. I look over, and Mr. Jim Jones is sitting Indian style at the entrance of the room and looking at this little girl and saying, hey, you can come in here. Come on, it's okay. Can you tell me what's wrong? And me and Dustin are sitting there, and I say, Dustin, do you see what's happening right there? And Dustin has been discipled by Jim. They've met a lot and done things. And I said, Dustin, you better be taking notes. Because
exactly.
what he is doing right there is incredible. Mm-hmm. And he, over the course of like 15 seconds, this little girl has her head in Mr. Jim's shoulder, and he's comforting her. And then she's fine the rest of the time. Mm. And what's amazing about that to me is I thought about that all day Sunday, and obviously still now, is that's the side of Mr. Jim that I would have never seen. That little girl would have never seen. The other kids in that classroom would have never seen if not given that opportunity to serve in that capacity.
Amen.
Maybe push beyond his comfort zone a little bit. And so church, like, as you're asked to serve in different ways, as you're pushed to serve in different ways, like, let these opportunities allow your comfort to push you a little further.
Yeah. Amen.
I know that seeing Mr. Jim love that little girl, and that mom probably seeing that, and
Absolutely.
me telling her later, like, hey, she was great. She was cared for. It's fantastic. Like, we were blessed by seeing that side of Mr. Jim, which is Christ working through Jim to love our body. So
it's one of the beautiful things about the church, is that God built the church as a multi-generational entity. The oldest to the youngest are important to the Lord, and therefore they're important to the church. And so the interacting is what we're talking about. So often church today is commodity driven. It's all about a product, and it's all packaged for certain age groups, and everybody's divided up. And here at Grace Fellowship, and I hope in all of our local churches, we get back to the model, which is granddaddies loving their spiritual grandchildren and caring for them, and grandchildren inspiring the Jim Joneses of the world to keep going, man, keep going, and you're making a difference. And so, man, what a beautiful picture. Thanks for sharing that with us, David.
And there is something that I want to tag on too on that, like you're pushing our people to get out of their comfort zone. There is a tendency in the world, in our culture, to always put your best foot forward. Wherever you're at, like show your bright side, or put your best. In the church, man, we don't want that. Like, we want that ugly foot. We want the corned up foot, right? Like give us just you. Just be you here. And
that's what was so cool Sunday is like he didn't do that to impress me or Dustin.
Right.
Or
nobody was watching.
Or that dog.
Watch how awesome I am.
It was just like, hey, this girl needs somebody.
Needs to happen.
That's me.
It's good.
Here I go.
Yeah.
So,
it's so good. Thanks, Jim.
Awesome.
And thanks for sharing that, David. Well, so coming up this next Tuesday, second Tuesday of November, is Election Day, as it always is every second Tuesday of November, and isn't that good to know? And so we thought this would be a good time to just discuss politics, civics in general, those kind of things. Now, granted, I know some of you probably puts you on the edge. The pastor's podcast is about to talk politics, and
dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, right. We're just gonna ask Carlton all the questions, make him answer everything, so you can beef it up with him. But not really. What we're trying to do here is we were discussing this yesterday, and there is a lot of leeriness when it comes to pastors and in the church. How loud should we be? What kind of things should we say? What kind of stuff should we put out there? We know that it's important that as the church, we don't ever sell out, right, to any political candidate or any political party, but that we've sold out to Christ.
Exactly.
And that's where we're at. But it is our civic duty as Christians who live in Calhoun County, which is a county in the state of Alabama, which the state of Alabama is a state in the United States of America.
Right.
And so that we understand civics, we understand how our government works, we understand our duty as people to vote and to know what's going on, to know the important, pertinent issues at hand, and to make a difference in those things with our vote. And we know that's why the Constitution was written. We know that's why the founders of this country, they said, we the people, we want the government to be in the hands of the people. And so we think it's important as church leaders that you understand your civic duty. And this is something, that I do think, Carlton, is being lost. My generation, and especially the generation after me, it's just that, I see these Instagram reels where guys are literally asking, people on the side of the street questions like how many states are in the United States.
It's appalling.
And nobody has a clue, right? So
it's appalling.
So why would we think that anybody is actually up to date on pertinent issues or what's going on or how they need to be voting or what they need to care about in their community, state, nation, if they don't even know general civics?
You're right. And I mean, it's so appalling. I know I have an inordinate affection. I get it for these things. I love it. I love politics. I love our government. And our nation.
Yeah, you're a history major.
And I was a history major. Took a lot of poli-science classes. I mean, I just love it. It's a fun thing for me. I know that's not for everybody.
Right.
I get that. Like Corey, he's not as big on that. Like he's involved and he votes and he's responsible, but you don't care as much about it as or give as much time to it as I give to it.
That's right.
And that's cool. That's the diversity. But you are involved. You are educating yourself enough to be a part of the system. And that's all we want to educate our people or encourage our folks here at Grace Fellowship. Know what you need to know to be involved at the level that we've been given the right to be involved in, which is at the voting booth. It appalls me sometimes. My children went to great schools, so I'm not bashing any school, but this is nationwide. This is actually a movement in our nation. I'll just ask you, Corey, how much in your school setting, in elementary and high school, did y'all memorize the states of the union, the capital cities of those states? Understand? Did y'all do that?
I wish you wouldn't ask me this because you're going to get me in trouble. Frank Tucker was actually my government. Right. And so
well, usually we learn it in fourth grade, so don't tell us who your fourth grade teacher is, third or fourth grade.
Yeah.
But my point is, my children in the public school system, they never learned those things. They were never taught that, and so I started looking to it, and this is how deep it gets. There's a movement in education now to not teach those things because they want us to see ourselves as one state, not the United States of America. 50 different states come together to make a nation, but they just want us to see ourselves as a federal government level, centralized government level. They don't want us to learn all the civics. And so I don't blame your generation, actually. I don't blame the generation after you. I look at it as it's an intentional move to make people disinterested. Because what happens when people get disinterested is then a small group runs the whole show. And that small group can be right or left or whatever, but they get to run the show because nobody knows, and they can just feed them information through TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and local news channel or whatever, little blurbs, little 15-second videos, 30-second videos to tell them who to vote for, and people go, well, I guess I'm supposed to vote, and they just go vote. And they know nothing about what they're doing, and they're actually changing the course of the country. I know we don't believe that, but you actually are changing the course of the country. So that's why we care, is not because it's ultimate. It is not ultimate. Our government is not ultimate. Our government is temporary, but it plays a role in today and how it folds out, at a citizenry level.
So I'm going to pick at something you said, and that's what you want us to do. So you said that it's an intentional move to get civics out of school in order to see ourselves as one big federal system, right?
Centralized.
So it seems like when you're saying stuff like that, like there's people at hand, there's particular players at hand that are pushing things that you don't think are good for the welfare of our country and as a nation and those kind of things.
Absolutely. There's a huge movement. This is not party driven. This is philosophical, much deeper than that. It goes into the roots of our education system at large and how we educate our children. That it's not a conspiracy. It's a fact. You can go read it, and we knew it was coming. Is if you train people to believe that they're better off if the experts and the central boards up in Washington, D.C. make all the decisions for them. If you train them to do that, then that's how they'll live their life. And they will become less responsible. They'll feel less engaged. And they'll just be like, well, what do? I don't live anywhere near Washington, D.C. I don't ever see these people. And yet those are the people that if we behave that way, the Constitution gets shredded, because what our founders did was actually our founders believed it was better for you to be the most engaged in your local community. You should know your mayor, you should know your city councilman, you should know your board of education, you should know the dog catcher. Like, that's what they believed. And you should be eating lunch with those people or sending them an email or making phone calls and being involved at the very local grassroots level. Because lots of decisions are being made at that level that affect your life directly.
Right.
If they raise the tax locally on gas, or they raise the tax locally or the fee for garbage collection, that affects your wallet today.
Yeah.
So next month when you pay your bill. But then people, they won't get engaged, and then they just get their bill and they're like, my bill went up $12 on gas collection. What in the world? They're just angry about it.
Yeah.
And then with that anger just feeds frustration. The frustration shuts us down. And again, every time we're getting lower turnout, lower education, we're giving power over to a smaller group of people to run the show.
Yeah.
And so our founders saw that as the worst. And so the more educated we are and the more we know about these things and get involved, I'm not saying just go vote. You've never even, you don't even know the names. You're just eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Don't do that.
Right.
I'm saying go learn who your mayor, who's running for mayor, and try to have a word with them, like get to know them a little bit, and then vote based on knowledge at the local, state, and then from the state to the federal government, because we're in a federal system where we have a division of powers, and so it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, but going back to something that you said, you said it runs deeper than political things and those kind of things. It's like a philosophical, new age idea maybe that some people have, that those who don't have need a handout. And I heard something. I was listening to Joe Rogan and Dr. Phil the other day, and one of the things Dr. Phil said was people don't need a handout; they need a hand up. Right? That's very different. The handout, hand up. But what you're saying is this handout. It might be a philosophy from a new generation or just a particular thought mind that like people in need, they just need help. But I think, David, and I'm going to kind of pull this way and see if we can connect. Do we not see this same pattern maybe in parenting? So I coach varsity basketball, and that means I deal with 16, 17, 18-year-old guys and the occasional 8th grader who's really good. But mainly 16, 17, 18-year-old young men. And I've done student ministry. I've worked with this group for a long time. And one of the things I try to instill in them is you're responsible. Like, you're responsible to know when we practice and to be here. You're responsible to know when our games are and to figure out transportation to those games. Don't call me telling me you don't have a ride to the game. Don't call me telling me you can't make it to practice, right? And I was even talking to somebody the other day, and they were like, telling me that one of the students, their account wasn't up to date, right? It's an account that's online, and I said, well, he's going to run. It's his fault. And what this other person told me was, well, it's not his fault. It's really his parents' fault. And I said, no, I wasn't going to get into an argument, but philosophically, I think that is something that we kind of have in mind, is this idea of, being so responsible for our children that we're doing everything for them and not allowing them to grow up, right? And so it's just a handout. And I'm responsible, right, to pay for your first car, and I'm responsible to pay for your college, and I'm responsible to pay for the wedding, and I'm responsible to, and here's what I'm saying, like, right, you get what I'm going?
Yeah.
Like, we're just responsible. And it's kind of like, I don't know philosophically if that's even biblical, right?
Yeah.
Like, if all this responsibility for, rather than maybe a responsibility to the child. So could that be playing a part in here maybe in this? David, thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Okay.
In the words of one of my seminary professors, there's a lot there. Something that I've seen, and you see that, like, no ownership of responsibility from the generations below us, and a lot of that is like overcompensation from parents, like trying to up the other parents, or look at gauging their parenting off of social media or the response in car line or what other parents are doing versus the needs of their family.
Man, that's so good that you just let me just pick out one thing you just said about the social media. Casey said the other day, her social media algorithm, this Instagram algorithm, is like throwing her all the kid things to do.
It's crazy.
All these kids, and it's like, she said that honestly, she didn't know if she was being a good mom the other day, and this wasn't her exact words, but she literally had been inundated by so many of these ideas in the fall to do with your kids that it's like, oh, we're not doing all these cool, sweet ideas, and it's like, yeah, you don't have to.
Yeah.
Go ahead. That's what you're talking about.
Yes, exactly. And that's beyond like how we parent our children, but we can look at our algorithms that are telling us what our life should look like or what we should think or what we should believe or how we should even vote. Like, those things are being sent our way through everything that we're touching technologically. We have to really be careful, especially in parenting, that we're not neglecting the needs of our family and trying to perform based on somebody else's family algorithm.
Good.
But we're looking at our family and what they need. I think there's a big misunderstanding in grace in a lot of this. It's the abuse of grace. And the school we used to be involved with, and try to be sensitive in how I tell this story, but a lot of the children that would come or most of the children that would come and live with us in our homes came from very hard situations. But there was also a manipulation in that where they understood how to use their story to get by with things.
Yeah.
And so we always ran up with issues with the school and teachers that would feel sorry for these children. But I mean, there was reason to feel sorry and to love and to show grace and patience and all these things. But in our sinfulness, our selfishness, our manipulation, it was easy for these children to use that to not take any responsibility. And so the teacher side of that was, I just showed them some grace. I just showed them a little bit of grace. They needed some grace. And it was like, hold up, like you're making our parenting very, very hard.
Yes.
Because you're abusing grace. It's not even grace at this point.
That's good.
They're not able to own, which you go to the spiritual side of that, like how are our children ever going to own their sin if they can't own that they messed up on their account? If they never see that,
right, then
we're not even able to show. If they can't see their own sin, then they're not even going to understand grace and their need for grace. And so
I love, what did you call it? Cheap grace, or what did you?
Abuse of grace.
Abuse of grace. I think that's so good because another quick story that goes right along with that. I had oftentimes when we see homeless folks or we see really poor folks, like poverty-ridden people, we obviously, and it's right that we have kind of a heart toward those people, but we would want to give a handout to those people because they're asking those kind of things. But I hung out with a friend of mine in the inner city of Birmingham several years ago, and it was shocking. He gives his whole life to these people in the inner city, very impoverished, poor, a lot of homeless people. And we were walking around one day, and he saw two young men, 17-year-old guys. And I'm watching these guys kind of play basketball on the court, and I'm thinking, man, I want to go over and get to know these guys. May not have much, those kind of things, like kind of give to them. And what he told me as I was about to go over, he said, don't even waste your time. Those guys are pieces of trash. Right? And he said something even worse. And I'm shocked. I literally looked at him and I just said, bro, what? Like, I'm not expecting that to come from you. Like, you're giving your life to these people. He was like, oh no, I've worked with them for years. He was like, they don't want to get right. They don't want to do right. They want to do wrong all the time. And it was like shocking to me, because what you're saying is so true. Like you said with the children, when you spent time with these children, what you understood was they've got real sin issues of wanting to just do bad. And there does need to be that time that we take with people and try to rehab. But let's not get off thinking that everybody's going to come to their senses. Like that's just not going to happen, right? And so we know that there are going to be those people who just want to do bad and destroy their lives all the time. And so we're always there to provide hands up, right? So this is, so Carlton, I hope that was part of the maybe underlying philosophy that maybe you were talking about, of just maybe that missing the mark of thinking that you're helping when you're actually hurting.
You're right. Right. And I think, and we might even ask the role of government in all of this, like does God have a plan for the government? Romans 13, which is a passage I have open, God gave us government, provisional, temporary governments of the world to restrain evil and reward good. And so it restrains evil by the bearing of the sword, and it rewards good at any way possible. So that's the purpose of government. It's a grace from God. It's provisional. It's temporary. It is not God's kingdom in the direct sense. It's not that God is bringing about His eternal kingdom through the kingdoms of this world. All of them will be abolished. They're all going to go away. But in this moment, right now, without government, we lose the restraint of evil in many ways, and it runs rampant. And we see that all over the world when governments begin to break down and you have anarchy take over. The wickedness that unfolds from that, the looting, the stealing, the raping, the murdering, the evil in men's hearts just goes wild because there's no fear of punishment or no fear of someone in authority stepping in. And so government is good. We have a right to participate in it at the local, then the state, then the national level. And our founders, what they did, it was so brilliant, was they made the government a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And so there was no special ruling class, supposed to be a ruling class like in Europe, a royal family, so to speak. This was a national experiment in taking power that had been centralized and just diffusing it down into the masses. But it's not a democracy. A democracy was something they actually feared. So a lot of people make that mistake. They think, well, we live in a democracy. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic, a democratic republic. So the democracy side of it is we do vote, but we vote for representatives who then go and speak on our behalves. Because again, no democracy has ever truly worked. Even in Greece and the small city states, it always broke down because people start to vote for their own special interests, and you just get division and hatred towards one another. So they set up this system that way that the power was diffused among the populace. They did that intentionally. They broke it down local, state, and national elections. And so when I have a problem, I'm to go to my local leadership first. And if it's not theirs to solve, I go to the state level. And if it's not the state's issue, then I go to my national level leader. So I can be engaged at every step of the process. I mean, I know I'm weird, but I have personally talked to my mayors, personally talked to my council member, personally talked to my state representative. I have FaceTime with them, talked to them, emailed them on important issues in Montgomery. The votes are coming up. I let them know what I think and ask them to consider my point of view, not to vote my way, but consider my point of view. I'm strange enough to have, petitioned our governor for certain things that I'm very passionate about. I've talked to Mike Rogers, our representative at the federal level. Personally, I've talked to both senators in this state. Personally, I'm very engaged. Why? Because I'm just one guy. But if everybody takes that approach, then no longer can the guy go up to Washington, hide out for 2 to 6 years, and just get along with special interests and ignore us. If we all get involved, he's going to be forced. He's going to be like, man, I got an engaged population back home. I can't go back there doing something that hurts them. Now, everything can't satisfy everybody, but I got to work for my people. Right now, we have a situation where, especially at the national level, our leaders aren't working for us. They're working for special interests. And then we'll complain about that. Oh, I mean, what does my vote matter anyway? What does my voice matter? Well, it matters because they're not hearing it. I guarantee you, if the representation in Washington was hearing from the masses on important issues, things that are changing our lives every day, they would begin to have to respond to that, or they would know, hey, when my name's on that ballot, I'm done. And so I'm not talking about parties. I'm not talking about being a partisan to some group or another. I'm talking about our responsibility of the fact that the government restrains evil. And I am the government. I mean, our founders, the people are the government, controlled by the Constitution, obviously, but we are the government. So please understand, this is not partisan. This is not, vote one way or another. This is get engaged with the community, get engaged with the state, get engaged at the national level. Christians have a bad habit. We have a bad habit, and it's getting worse, of complaining but not being part of the solution. We just want to complain. Oh, everything's going against us. Everybody's, but we're not taking part. And so that's all we're advocating.
I think also maybe scared to be a part of things. What you just said is so good because I think we keep saying our generation and below, but I think everybody now is being trained that no, your way of being involved politically is to like something on Facebook or to retweet something or to make a post that makes your stand. And your voice can be heard in those ways, but what you're talking about is these people are working. These representatives are working for us, the people. So get to know them, get to know their intentions, their hearts, and let your voice and what matters to you be known to them, because that's who they're representing.
Yeah, and the closer they are to us, the more they respond to us. Like, it's easy for me to get FaceTime with my local politician. It's more difficult to get FaceTime with the senator of the state. I've never had FaceTime with the senator of the state. I've sent emails, and I get a canned response.
Yeah.
But I've registered my statement. I've written letters, but they're not going to respond to me. No, but what that does is an aid that they have puts that in a pile. I mean, it's really talking to people inside of the machine, kind of literally they weigh it out. They're like, well, on this issue, we got 68% of our district, our state, our whatever, saying they're on this side, and the rest are over here. That doesn't mean he's going to side with the 68 or she, but boy, they better pay attention, because they know their next election will reflect. If they go against the 68% time and time again, when primary season comes, somebody primaries against them, they're done, because everybody's done with them. You know what I'm saying? So by being silent, then we're being fed candidates that we have no attachment to. We're not making our voice heard. We've got to make our voice heard.
Yeah, it makes sense, and I think you're probably not going to make your voice heard either unless you're understanding what's going on, like you mentioned. And one of the things we're going to tag in this video is this is called the naturalization test, and there's there'll be a link to a quick civics lesson. I actually went through this last night. Found it pretty cool. But basically, if you're an immigrant and you're going to become a citizen of the United States, you got to take this test. And out of these 100 questions, they're going to pick 10. You got to answer 6 of these right. And it's wild as we go through these how many of these, like, you may want to just test yourself at home. Like, would you pass this test? Like, do you know the answers to this question? Do you know how your country works? Do you know how your state works? Do you know how different levels and branches of power are delegated? It's really interesting, but I think knowledge, understanding how the machine, you use the word machine, how the machine works, and then being able to, rightly get involved. But one of the things we started with, you mentioned, like, these undercurrents are happening at a federal level, like these undercurrents are happening, and then they trickle down to the state level. And because honestly, while we are the United States, a lot of the federal and national level is involved in every state, right? And
unfortunately,
but one of the biggest things we see is, like, school curriculum. And that's making it very difficult, right, for Christians to be involved in public school. It is something that I'm hearing, like, most Christians way out now, at least. Like, I mean, when I was a kid, like,
it was no question.
You just went to public school, right? Yeah, like, I mean, and there were some people out there, I'm not saying there's not any, but there were some people who were still questioning and pilfering through. But now it's almost like it's a constant question. And so we just see that trickling down more, but then also different values from a federal level. And so we mentioned one value, right? Like this value of giving handouts rather than hand-ups, and the best way to help people and all those different things. That's a very complicated issue. So we're not trying to
your
make
example was your story was so good, Corey, because this is one thing I would say. The more centralized something becomes, the more disconnected it becomes from the local local location. So if we, in your instance, your friend that's in inner city Birmingham, I would contest, because he's there every day, he's working every day, he sees people every day. He knows better how to help his people, the people on his streets around him, than anybody will ever know in Montgomery anybody will ever know in Washington, D.C. But what we do as ministries, as individuals, as we say, well, I'm just not an expert on that, so let the experts handle it. Well, they're not experts.
Right.
And that's a big problem. It's like how he treats someone in Birmingham and the things he can offer them to help them up instead of just hand them out is different than in Chicago. It's different than in New York. And he would be a fool to go from Birmingham to even Montgomery and think, well, I'm dealing with the same problems. No, he's got to get educated on the local issue. It's very localized.
And I'm so glad you brought up that point, because this is the same thing happening in parenting. And I'll get there in just a second with another Dr. Phil episode. I don't know why I'm watching so much Dr. Phil. He might be in my algorithm. But it's another.
You said it. He's going to be now.
It's another issue here where my friend, I mentioned, and it probably shocked some of you, that he called those guys a piece of trash, right? He sees God's image in them.
Sure.
He loves them. It's the reason he moved there.
Right.
What he's saying by their pieces of trash is not saying they're worthless or they have no value, but they are acting at 17, 19 years old like worthless individuals.
Right.
We see the scriptures talk about that all the time. I'll tell my kids that all the time. Hey, the way you're acting right now is garbage.
Right.
It's trash, right?
Yeah.
Like so understand. But here's the problem. Like you said, when that gets disconnected, no one at this federal level would ever say these people are worthless or trash individuals, right? Because you just can't say that. You can't pronounce stuff like. But when you're in the sense, it takes on a whole different meaning, and I think that's what you're trying to get at. And so.
When I went and worked in inner city Memphis one summer with a group, and there was a lady there running that ministry that was just phenomenal. She was like in her 70s, and she could say things and do things with those guys, even at 25, 30 years old. They would come down the street and they would be acting, out of sorts or whatever, causing nervousness for little kids. She'd just call them by name. She knew them by name.
Yeah.
She said, hey, get out of here. You're causing problems. And we don't want none of that around here, And why are you not dressed this way? And have you been to work this week? You need to go to work.
Right.
A guy in Washington wearing a suit, sitting in a room like this, and he's like, well, just throw him another $10 million. Just throw another 10. Money's not the solution.
Right.
Relationships are the solution.
Right.
And that's what we're doing. We're disengaging.
Yes.
And so if we'll get engaged, I think in Anniston,
Yeah.
you can ride through Anniston any time of day and night, and you see people that are in need.
Yeah.
Like you do. And that's not uncommon. But do you know Diane Smith?
Yeah.
Diane
Great
Smith,
question. She's
right down here in Anniston. She's doing great work in the name of Christ.
Yeah.
And how can we help Diane?
Right.
How can we get involved? How can we be educated? We may be handing somebody $20 thinking, boy, I'm doing a good thing. And Diane might sit there and say, put your $20, don't give that guy $20. She's right to do that. And she knows them.
But it's what's so important is
she's
that
engaged.
At the federal level, we're going to say all 17-year-old boys and girls get this much money. And meanwhile, Diane or somebody like her would say, no, give this one that. That's fine.
Yeah.
These, no. That one, yes. That's the
Exactly.
same way we do with our kids. And so,
Yeah.
but now you brought up a different point. Let me just end us with this idea is that you've called us today, Carlton, and this podcast is all about taking up our civic duty.
That's right.
Right. And that's what we want you to do is take up your civic duty. It's one of the duties that you have. But even a bigger duty than your civic duty is your duty to Christ, to express his kingdom, to expand his kingdom right where you live and to the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is, man, let us get more involved with people like Diane Smith. Let us be the hands and feet of Civic right here in our Civic, in our town, in our county. And let us go to work. Let us get to know those folks who need help. And let our face be the ones that they know where good help comes from. We're doing this right now with several different ministries that David's got us going with. Praise God for that. Let's continue that work and let us also carry out our civic duty and vote.
One resource I would give also it's a book, you may want it or not, but Politics After Christendom. Politics After Christendom. I think it's written by Van Drunen. Excellent resource because what he helps us understand is from a Christian perspective, what is my relation to the political? And especially in a pluralistic society, everybody doesn't have the same values. This isn't God. This isn't God's theocracy here in the United States. This is a secular government run by the people, so to speak. So what's my responsibility? He does a good job of putting things in order for us to think through, like you just did, Corey. I mean, no way am I saying that the most important thing you'll ever do is be engaged politically. Right. But I do think it's an irresponsible thing for us to have the opportunity and just say, that doesn't matter to me.
Yep.
I think that's very irresponsible.
Absolutely.
So next Tuesday, the polls open early in the morning. They go till at least 7 at night. So educate yourself between now and then. Know the candidates and the issues, and take with you the conscience given to you by the Holy Spirit, and go cast a good vote, a good solid vote in those elections that you have an opportunity to be involved in, and then love Jesus. Just go love Jesus and love your neighbor, and you know that you've done at least the bare minimum of what we should be doing as citizens.
And I think just something that we need to say that you've said earlier is that voting next Tuesday has multi-generational impacts. That's something I remember hearing a lot growing up. Is my grandmother's a history teacher, and she loves all this stuff, always pushing us, did you vote? Sending us pictures with her sticker on. But she would always say, and others, you're not just voting for you, you're voting for your kids and your kids' kids. And we've seen that with a lot of different things, but don't be uneducated and think that you're just voting for something that's going to impact the next 2 years, and that's it. But that's something that I've been neglective in, and I'm seeing and wanting to become more educated in all these areas, not to where it's ruling my life and it's turning into conspiracy theory, all this crazy stuff, but finding out how to be educated, why I need to care about these things, why I need to be educated on my kids' education because they're in public school, and how those things are going to impact us. And so all that stuff becomes more important to you as you age. And so don't wait too long for that to become important. Like we all need to see that these things have long-lasting impacts. So.
Yeah, well,
absolutely.
Thank you guys for conversation on this. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Hopefully, man, it stirs up more conversation that we'd love to have offline of the podcast. But thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you next time.